Hello, and welcome back to Random Vids. So today, we're going to be doing another Total Drama video. It's been quite some time. I've been very busy, and had other ideas for other videos that I wanted to do. But now we're back, and today, we're going to be ranking every single episode from Total Drama All-Stars. So I feel like Total Drama All-Stars really could have been such a really great season. It's an All-Star season. You're bringing back teams from or people from the first generation, second generation cast to compete again for second and sometimes fourth time to win the $1 million. I think that's really cool. Unfortunately, though, the way they ended up doing Total Drama All-Stars was very questionable, very lazy, and very odd. So it didn't end up being well loved by many. And I've already ranked every season last year, but that was a whole year ago. My opinions still remain the same? We'll find out, and I'll let you know at the end. But now let's get into the ranking of the Total Drama All-Stars episodes. So number 13, and my absolute least favorite episode of Total Drama All-Stars is easily Sunday Muddy Sunday. Oh, come on, you knew this was going to be the worst episode of Total Drama All-Stars. This is well known as not just the worst episode of Total Drama All-Stars, but the absolute worst episode of the whole series. And it shows, even though I knew about it being the worst episode way before even watching Total Drama All-Stars. But good lord, what were they thinking with this episode? What the heck is this? Why would they air something like this? Why would they create something this god-awful and horrible? And I'm very over-exaggerating about this, am I? Okay. I know a lot of people really hate Sunday Mighty Sunday, and when I did watch it for the first time, I was just like, wow, like, I completely understand why people, like, dislike this episode so much after watching it. So here's what happens. So, Gwen and Courtney are good friends again, and we have this whole stupid story about Mike this season. Wow, what's going on with Mike? He's a great character from Revenge of the Island. It's cool seeing him back, and oh, he's the main villain for this season. Because, you know, you can't really reuse the old villains because we know what their strategies are and stuff. Although, they reused Heather in World Tour and stuff, but not like the main villain. Usually every season we get a new villain. Because we get Island with Heather, Action with a mix of characters. Action with Courtney, World Tour with Alejandro, Revenge with Scott, Lightning, and Joe, I guess. All Stars with Mal, and Pocket-2 with Chris. No, Pocket-2 with like every character. Good lord. Redonkulous Race with the Ice Dancers, and then with the reboots with all those characters. But you see, the thing is, when you create total drama villains, they're usually evil, yet they're relatable. Look at Heather and Alejandra. They created these characters perfectly. So they could still be considered, you know, evil, but they're also still very, relatable and very fun to watch, and can be, the comedy relief characters of some episodes, honestly. Especially for a season like this. Or like they're even getting along, even if they are pretending, they are at least trying to get along with the other cast, and it makes it, they construct villains like Heather and Alejandro perfectly. Even if people, gay roll, don't like the villains of Total Drama, you gotta admit, you can't get worse than Mal. What were they thinking? This is a villain from Total Drama gone wrong. Basically, take away all the good things about Heather and Alejandra being villains, and you get Mal. He's one of those just stereotypic villains. He has no goal to win. He's just there to be evil and get people out. He does a horrible job of being a villain, and he's so predictable it's not even funny. And he gets so much stupid plot armor. I hate it when characters get plot armor. I understand you have to kind of keep villains in for the drama and stuff, but they could do it much better. Basically, the only way is to keep them surprise villains. Usually when they do that, like Alejandro, then they don't really get as many plot armor, which is, or like they pretend to be good to the other players, and don't really show their true colors until later on. That's how you do a good villain. Mal just kind of pops in and out of nowhere, and he's just a horrible, horrible character who easily is the worst thing about Total Drama All-Stars. I haven't even started talking about this episode yet. I'm just so focused on our main villain. Anywho, so the challenge is they have to create a sundae for Chris's interns because he's a horrible person and won't feed them. Let me just count down all the horrible things in this episode. We need to do a everything wrong with Sunday Muddy Sunday. I need to do that one of these times. Everything wrong with Sunday Muddy Sunday from Total Drama All-Stars. That would be perfect. I need to do that sometimes. I gotta remember. Because this would easily be an episode with like at least over 1 million sins. Anywho, back to the... I keep getting sidetracked because of how, like, god-awful this episode is. So, finally, when we have some sort of story going on in Total Drama All-Stars that isn't just Mal, guess who ruins it? That's right, Mal. Because Courtney made this chart about who she thinks she wants to make it to the finals. And she ended up choosing Scott to go in the finals with her. But since Gwen is her best friend, that doesn't rub right with Gwen. And Scott is randomly drawn with a rat tail, which doesn't make any sense, but okay. Which that, of course, makes him upset. I think that's a little silly. Drawing him with a rat tail. But my thing is, how did Mal get his hands on Courtney's chart? Courtney is not the type of person to just leave something in random spots and just hope that no one's going to steal it. She's smart enough to know the people on this show, so she's not just going to leave something out and about for someone to take, even if the only person she really can't trust is, well, honestly, there's not really too many big main villains. She likes Scott, she likes Gwen, she doesn't really know Mike and Zoe that much, but I don't know, maybe she just thought, oh, there's not really many villains left, so I don't have to worry about them trying to steal this or something. I don't know what she was thinking, but somehow, some way, Mal ended up stealing it and showed everybody Courtney's plans, which completely ruined any hope for a decent ending to this season. Because now, Courtney has lost her friend Gwen and her new boyfriend Scott. So then the whole episode is just meanders along with everyone just bickering with each other, and it just gets so freaking old, and it gets to the point where it's like, what the heck were they thinking when they designed an episode this horrible that it's everyone's least favorite episode of Total Drama history? What were they thinking? I don't understand what they thought was a good idea. The only thing that is decent is the challenge itself ain't bad. But this is the first season where we don't really get those double challenges. Instead, it's just like one big long challenge. Which, okay, but the main focus, because we're having all these great characters come back, the main focus shouldn't be the challenges. It should be the drama and the characters. Like, put less focus on the challenge and put it more on these characters. That's my problem with this season. It's too rushed. But, oh god, Sunday Muddy Sunday is easily 100%, without a doubt, my absolute least favorite episode of Total Drama All-Stars and my absolute least favorite episode of any Total Drama season to date. I don't think they could ever get this bad in an episode. This is crazy bad. I don't know what you want me to do with this. This is garbage. And the final four is just, I don't know. What is it with All-Star seasons? Total Drama All-Stars had so much potential to be one of the best seasons ever. Then we got this. And then now look at Disventure Camp. What the heck is going on with that Final Four, too? I haven't talked about Disventure Camp yet. I'll have to talk about that once Season 3 ends. But it's on its All-Star season, and it's pretty weak, too! Oh, good lord. These All-Star seasons just need to be way better. If Total Drama wants to do another All-Star season, cool. But do not make another season like this, and don't you dare make a Sunday Muddy Sunday ever again. Okay. I better move on because, like I said, I could talk about this episode all day. It's horrible, and I already wasted 10 minutes. So, horrible episode, easy F minus. You know what, how about a Z minus? I think that sounds about right for this episode. Let's move on to something a tad more tolerable than this. Number 12. And that is The Bold and the Bootyful. This is easily my second least favorite episode of Total Drama All-Stars. It does absolutely nothing. The challenge is so dumb, you can tell everyone, including the writers, is so tired of this season. What's the challenge? They have to do a bunch of random things to kind of... They have to go and collect items for Chris, basically. Chris's headquarters gets blown up by Duncan, and Gwen has to go and retrieve a picture for him. Mike and Zoe have to retrieve something else, and Scott has to go to a ship to retrieve something else. You see, next to Total Drama World Tour, I actually do remember a lot more of Total Drama All-Stars, but it's a season that's hard to forget once you watch it, so, I mean, I don't know what you want me to do. Anywho, it's Mike, instead of going to do his challenges, ends up sabotaging Gwen and Scott. Basically, he's the main center of attention for this episode. Oh, great. Except it's not Mike, it's Mal. Of course. That's exactly what I wanted to watch Total Drama for. This stereotypic bad guy who... It makes you wonder... The writers forgot for that split second that this is supposed to be a spin-off of the TV show Survivor. Now, yeah, it's cartoon. They can add some cartoony things in here. But... Man, compare the humor in this season to season 1, and you can see how cartoony the humor has become. You push a button to reset the... Oh my gosh, I swear. I don't know what the writers were doing this season. They clearly were not on their A-game. And they definitely went for the next season either. We'll get to that one eventually. Oh god, that's going to be even more of a horrible thing to get through. Anywho, I'm at the point in this season where I'm just so sick of the season. I'm so ready for it to end. This episode is the definition of boring. Now, I have said before that some episodes in Season 1 have been pretty boring, but this episode just takes the cake. Like, literally, they do absolutely nothing in this episode except Mal luckily making it to the final 2 again, or Mal luckily not being eliminated because Zoe wants him in the finals, or wants Mike. At least Zoe isn't... Okay, a lot of people say Zoe is stupid in this season, or so gullible. I can sort of see that, but at the same time, I mean, Mal does I shouldn't say he does a decent job, but around Zoe he tries not to act like an evil villain. To keep her guessing. And yeah, Zoe may not be the smartest contestant out there, but it's not like she just, oh snap, all of a sudden now she knows Mike is Mal. Now, it takes time, and she slowly starts realizing, Mike may not be Mike. Unfortunately, this whole main story completely ruined Total Drama All-Stars because it was the main focus point. What is it with these All-Star seasons creating one stupid story to mess up the whole season? Total Drama All-Stars had to create the whole Mal story. That messed that all up. Disventure Camp had to do the whole stupid Jake, Tom, and Aiden bullcrap. That messed up all that junk. There's nothing else I really have to say about this episode. Gwen and Scott go home, and that's that. Extremely boring episode for an extremely weak second half to a pretty already weak season. Nothing else I have to say. Let's move on to number 11. Zeke and Ye Shall Find. Okay, at least we're out of the dumpster, terrible, horrible episodes. The rest of the episodes, at worst, is bad. And at best is, we'll get to those ones. So, it's the 100th episode of Total Drama. And Chris wants to... So, this is one thing I really hate about the newer seasons of Total Drama, or at least like this weird era of Total Drama, where Chris will pretend, oh, it's going to be such a great episode, we're going to do so many fun things, and then it's something stupid, and this is one of those episodes that he's like that. It's like, oh, we're going to play in a 100th party and stuff, you're all invited, and then Zeke captures him and the whole challenge changes. They've done this before in Revenge and Pocket 2, and it's no fun, and I think that cliche gets old very quickly. So, yeah, Ezekiel, the mutated Ezekiel, is still in the show for some reason. One of the worst Season 1 characters is still... Why are we still getting episodes with Ezekiel in it? If they would have kept him as normal Ezekiel, honestly, that wouldn't have ruined his character so much. But because they turned him into this weird mutated zombie, and he had to ruin the finale to the best season ever, you know, he's not really my favorite character. And they use him way too much, honestly. Every once in a blue moon is fine, but they don't need him in every season. So this is our Ezekiel season. So, Ezekiel captures Chris, because why the heck not, and now the contestants have to go and search for Chris. Luckily, at least at this point, we still had a bunch of great characters in it. But let's be real, the only character who steals the show is Alejandro at this point. He's hilarious, and I like his solo moments since now Heather is out, so we got to see some interesting Alejandro moments just by himself. Which is kind of interesting, since we got to see Heather solo, but not really ever Alejandro solo. So it's really nice seeing this. And the Courtney and Scott moments are pretty funny, too. Say what you want to say, I think they're a funny relationship. Not as good as Duncan and Courtney, of course, but they already ruined that. Might as well put Courtney with someone else. And her and Scott together, I think, is pretty funny. Big for a decent group. Unfortunately, surprise, surprise, our main villain of the season had to ruin that relationship. We can thank him for pushing Cameron into Courtney to make it look like Courtney tried to kiss Cameron in front of Scott to make Scott jealous and mad at Courtney to break them up, and oh yeah, this is the problem. The show this season was too rushed, with way too many storylines packed together into one. Just wait till we get to another episode that has a lot of those problems. Anywho, Ezekiel ends up capturing everyone else, I guess, and puts them in a little jail cell. Gwen ends up saving the day, she gets immunity, and they vote off Cameron because he's too hurt to compete. Wow, Cameron made it really far this season. Now, don't get me wrong, Cameron is a great character, but making it to 7th place after he just made it to the finals, and him just being a decent character, I would much rather see characters like Lindsay or Joe make it further, since they're way more developed characters, way more interesting, funnier, and they're overall great characters. Cameron already had his fame in Season 4. You can tell this was definitely not his season, but I guess for once we actually had a decent elimination for a pretty meh episode. What's the best part about this episode? Anything with Alejandro or Scott in it. What's the worst thing about this episode? Mal and Ezekiel. Let's move on to... We're at the top 10 already, so... Let's move to my top 10. And that is... You gotta be kidding me. Hey, this is an interesting episode to put in that top 10 from Total Drama All-Stars. But this is the downfall era of Total Drama, so what are you going to expect? Anywho, it's pretty simple. The teams have merged now into one. So, it's every man for himself. Guess who the main character is for this episode? You're never going to guess, but it starts with the letter M. Yeah. Anywho, Mike ends up sabotaging the teams and gets the good boat and gets far ahead. But I guess ends up getting stopped due to Zoe going in the pool in the middle of the ocean and see if that will trigger Mike's personality. Mike actually ended up coming back for like a split second and then went back to Mal. So Mal ends up going to not make himself look weird to help Zoe out. So of course Zoe's back to, oh yeah, it's Mike. Like, what were these people thinking? And we're all here like, Zoe, come on. It's not that hard to figure out. This is still way better than how gullible Jake is from Disventure Camp. That is way, way worse. Anywho, so Gwen and Courtney end up sharing a boat together because now they're besties. Okay, kind of cool. I'm glad that they're besties again, but it just doesn't have the same, like, funness that it did in World Tour. Maybe it's because they're not really focusing too much on it to develop it. They're just kind of there helping each other out. I don't know. Something about it just ain't as fun as World Tour. Anywho, Alejandro ends up winning by a nose, which I thought was pretty funny. Duncan ends up blowing up Chris's little shack thing, which, of course, that ends up sending him home, which I'm fine with, since he already made it to the Final Five, like, every other season since, so seeing a season where he's going home a little early is nice. But he's still going home during merge. What is it with Duncan having to make it to merge every season? Duncan actually had some pretty interesting storylines this season, too, with him being the nice guy, which I thought was kind of interesting. Hey, it's either that or it's the Mal storyline. Take your pick. Nothing else really happens in this episode. Best parts of the episode was easily Alejandro. Other than that, the rest of the episode is pretty just meh. I don't really remember too much about this episode. I just remember they get on rafts and boats and stuff, and Cameron throws Scott into the water to feed the Fang. Just kidding. To make the raft actually have a motor, basically. And Alejandro wins, and that's that. Pretty just meh episode. Nothing else I have to say, so let's move on to number 9, which is the Obsta-kill course. We're still in that kind of meh era of Total Drama All-Stars, but at least this is a better merge episode. What is it with all the merge episodes just being so horrible? Horribly terrible at worst, and just meh at best. I don't know what it was, but Total Drama All-Stars started, like, really decreasing during the merge point. I don't know what it was. Maybe because they got rid of too many great characters at the start. It kept some of the characters that are kind of questionable. I don't know what it was. But the second half of season of All-Stars was just really odd. And a lot of people can say the same thing. It was just like, what were they thinking? Now, Obstacle Course's main character finally is in Mao. Instead, we focus on Alejandro for once. Good, finally, a really great character who has made it this far, who definitely has been my favorite part about a lot of these merge episodes, between him and Scott. So they're doing an obstacle course, but of course, because it's Chris, it has to be as painful as ever, because as the seasons go on, Chris goes more and more downhill. Not sure why. Why does everything just have to go downhill as the seasons go on? Chris, the story, I don't know. But anywho, the elimination order. Anywho. So with the Obsta-kill course, guess who kills this course? Yeah, you're right. Mal, of course, does a great job in... Nah, just kidding. He doesn't do... Actually, you know, he does do a pretty decent job, but he lets Zoe win to get immunity. Just so he can sabotage Alejandro. It was nice kind of seeing the Alejandro versus Mal moments of this episode, but I know exactly what's going to happen at the end of the episode. I'm here rooting for Alejandro, of course, because he's the way better villain, but of course he ends up getting sent home. But Alejandro actually had a pretty good season. Getting 6th place, not that bad. And he was really fun to watch, too. Like I said, Alejandro is how you do a villain correctly. So, if you think I'm wrong, go ahead. A.k.a. my brother. I know he hates the villains in Total Drama. He tells me that all the time. There's only one villain he likes, and that's Scott. And Joe. Anywho, back to this episode. So the story itself is very weak. It's just Mal, for some reason, gaining a bunch of strength to crush Alejandro's wrist. What kind of sense did this make in every way, shape, or form? Alejandro is super strong, and Mal is this tiny little toothpick, and now all of a sudden he's stronger than Alejandro? How does that make any sense? They're just This is the problem with Total Drama All-Stars. They changed the character to match the story instead of changing the story to match the characters. And this is when the characters get their character derailments, is because they want to change the characters to fit the story instead of changing the story to fit the characters, like they would have for the older seasons. Hey. So they end up booting Alejandro off. A shame, because he was a great character. But I guess he did make it to the final 2 in World Tour, so he wasn't going to make it there again. Best parts about this episode was easily Scott. Anytime he'd get hurt, it was hilarious. I especially love the part where they have to choose a rope and climb over the wall. I already knew from the beginning that Scott was going to choose the electric one, and of course he did and gets electrocuted, and that gets me every time because I see it coming. Like, it's predictable, but it's funny. And Scott has been a really great character this season too, because he's lasted really long, and I love his comic relief this season. He may not be the main villain, but he doesn't really need to be. He's a great character overall, and one of the characters that actually didn't end up getting derailed. But yeah, episode-wise, it's definitely not my favorite, but at least it has some moments that make it interesting enough. Now let's move to number 8, which is Saving Private Leech Ball. One thing that the writers actually did decent with this season was the first half of it. They did a really great job showing us what could be a really great All-Star season, and not slowly, but it surely fell to not be what they promised us. And unfortunately, my least favorite episode out of the good era of All-Stars is Saving Private Leech Ball. This is the episode that started showing some problems with Total Drama All-Stars, and just kind of showed some of that downgrade to the season in general. So, instead of playing paintball like the older seasons, they end up playing leech ball, because, that's way more interesting, and that's exactly what I wanted to see. That's another thing. They try to create challenges from older seasons, I think, but I don't understand where the Sunday one came from. You know what? That episode was a total mess up, and I think it was something they didn't mean to create, or they were drunk creating it. I don't know. Anywho, this was back when they tried to actually somewhat try to recreate challenges. I don't know. I think it was a pretty meh episode overall, just because nothing much happens. Duncan and Courtney end up switching teams, so Duncan's on the good team and Courtney's on the villains team. At least this is another season I remember the team names for. They don't last really long, though, because we only have 14 characters. Jeez Louise. We need more than just 14. That's not enough. Absolutely not. At least give us like 18 to 20. I think that's a perfect amount. Anywho, back to what I was saying. The villains get the good stuff, or the stuff that, should have made them win, but instead they end up losing to the Heroic Hamsters, and they end up sending home one of the biggest, weirdest eliminations of the season. They sent home Joe for some reason. Why would they send home Joe? She literally carried this episode and carried you guys, because everyone else got eliminated except for Joe. She was the last one, and she was there trying to get Courtney and Zoe, but unfortunately she was the only one left. Why would they vote Joe out? Joe was doing so good. This was another problem with All-Stars. The elimination order is garbage. Joe is one of these characters that I would love to see make it to the final 2, because she's just such a great character, and she steals the show. She is hilarious. I love her nicknames. This is how you create a good villain. She might not be quite as villainous as Heather, but she still is definitely a villain, and she's a funny one at that. It was kind of interesting teaming up all the villains together, and they were definitely 100% the better team out of the two. That's what I should do sometime, too. Rank every single team from Total Drama. I gotta wait till I watch the reboot seasons now, because I'm currently in the middle of season 1 of a reboot, but I gotta watch the reboot ones so I can rank those teams too. Anywho, easily the worst part about this episode is the fact that they replaced, well, for starters, the fact that they replaced the paintballs with leeches, ugh, and the fact that they eliminated Joe. Very weak elimination choice. Nothing else I have to say, so let's move to number 7, which is no one egg-spects the Spanish opposition. What is it with weird total drama names? I will never understand it. So in this episode, the campers get to go to the fun zone for the challenge. Another one of these dumb excuses for Chris to pretend that, oh, this is going to be such a cool episode for you guys. Psych, this is just fun for me. That cliche gets pretty old, not gonna lie. And also the fact that the theme is one of my least favorite things about Revenge of the Island. The whole mutated stuff got so dry and so old, in my opinion. I was just ready for the classic island. I'm sure none of this ever happened in Survivor before. But like I said, the writers are far past Survivor at this point. Anywho, this is actually a decent episode. We still have a lot of characters in it yet, and they're all really fun to watch. Also the fact that Cameron has now switched over from the heroic hamsters to the villainous vultures, which has some interesting interactions between him and the people on the villainous vultures. But he ends up sticking by Gwen's side, because Gwen's the only one who's not really a villain. Anywho, there's a lot of kind of funny moments, and we got to see some development in Scott and Courtney together, and of course Heather and Alejandro. You can never go wrong with Heather moments. They are hilarious. And there's a lot of other funny moments that happen. Duncan trying to be Duncan and not this soft, sweet guy because he's on the erotic hamsters now. And this was back before we had all that stupid Mal plot drama to completely ruin the whole thing. Because he was still Mike at the time, with Mal popping up every once in a while. That was way, way more tolerable, and that's what they should have stuck with, but unfortunately no. But hey, I think this episode is really great. There's only one thing that makes it this far down. The elimination, and how much they try to derail Heather as a character. Heather, being one of the smartest characters in the show, decides to leave her totem that she found behind a rock so she can pick it up later. Okay, why not just take it with you now? I'm sure you have pockets or somewhere to put it. We see other people put it like behind their backs and it disappears into thin air. I'm sure you can do the same thing. But unfortunately, her stupidness leads to her elimination. Heather, you definitely deserve that, because, come on, that was so dumb. And Alejandro, of course, was watching and ended up taking the immunity idol, and it's funny how everyone voted for Alejandro, and he is like, alright, let's see who's going home, and it's Heather. Yeah, Heather made it to the final 4 in 2 seasons, but she's such a great character, and I really wanted to see more of Heather. Also the fact that when she figures out that someone stole it, she blames Chris. Yeah, like Chris stole it. He wasn't even in the fun zone. What about Alejandro? Aren't you guys like frenemies? I don't even know how that works. Also, another thing I liked about the first half of All Stars was anytime Alejandro would just walk in his hands to fake his legs not being able to work. I thought that was hilarious. And like I said, they could have had more of this story to work with. More Heather Alejandro stuff. That would have been perfect. But instead we got the stupid Mal plot. So, whatever. Besides the horrible elimination, I do think the rest of the episode is pretty good. Now let's move on to number 6, which is the final wreck-ening. So Total Drama has a lot of things to fix, with 2 trashy, horrible episodes throughout the whole series, back to back. We needed a somewhat decent finale to at least tie up the story and try to fix some of the horrible things they've been doing. And they tried, and I didn't think it went half bad. So, obviously our finals are Mike and Zoe. Oh, sorry, Mal and Zoe. So instead of the contestants coming to watch them do a final battle, instead the contestants get to pick out 2 people to help them out. So Mal ends up picking Heather and Alejandro, and Zoe ends up picking Gwen and Cameron. Okay, pretty interesting. But unfortunately then the intern is stupid and doesn't tie everyone else down, and they all just float away, and that's literally the last time we see any of those other characters. Wow. We really need another All-Star season just so I can make sure some of those characters are okay, like Joe and Scott, Lindsay, Courtney. Hope you guys are okay. Anywho, so first half of it is basically just more Mal versus Zoe stuff, because now Mal can stop pretending in front of Zoe since she knows and stuff. And the challenge is another weird, like, obstacle course. It's so hard to describe these challenges because the focus isn't on the story, it's on the challenges. That's what we didn't need for All-Stars. But anywho, they have to make their way up to the tippy top and pull the sword out. And that's basically how the whole thing goes. The best parts of what really makes this episode this far up, though, is, of course, say it with me, Heather and Alejandra. They carry this episode 100%. Also, the fact that some, at least, of those horrible things about All-Stars were finally getting resolved. Like Mal finally turning back into Mike so that both him and Zoe can just have a fun boyfriend-girlfriend race to the finish. Now, it isn't really that satisfying seeing Mike win since he didn't really deserve it, since he was only here for, what, like 40% of the season? Not even that, like 30% of the season. It's definitely more satisfying seeing Zoe win, because she's one of my favorite characters, and she did a great job. But honestly, the whole way they made the finals for this and Revenge were very off. I think that Mike and Zoe should have made it to the finals in Revenge, and I think that Lindsay and Joe should have made it to the finals in this season. Lindsay and Joe are both amazing characters who got robbed in some of their seasons. Okay, well, Joe might have been asking for it, but Joe is a great underrated character, and she definitely deserved Final 2, and Lindsay too, because that at least would have been a villain versus hero, and it still would have been a Gen 1 versus Gen 2 character. That would have been so much better, and I'm sure many other people agree. What is it with us having to have these stupid finales? Alright, well, I do like Mike and Zoe, and they definitely do deserve finales as well. This wasn't either one of their strongest seasons. At least the finale was decent, and heck, I would almost say it's better than Revenge of the Islands finale, just because the Revenge of the Islands finale kind of hums and haws around, and it doesn't get carried by any fun characters. It's just Cameron defeating Lightning, and there you go. This one, on the other hand, is actually pretty interesting because of how horrible the last, like, 2 episodes were. We finally get an actual good episode for once, and we get to see some characters we haven't seen in a while, like Heather and Alejandra. They definitely needed more screen time for this season. The season was way too short, and they definitely should have been more the main characters. But I guess if I want main characters like Heather and Alejandro, I'll just watch World Tour. That's fine. World Tour is way better anyway. I guess it's then confirmed that Heather and Alejandro are dating. See, here's the problem. Heather and Alejandro are so interesting characters that I trail off talking about Mike and Zoe and just start talking about Heather and Alejandro. It's because they're way better characters, at least in this season. Mike and Zoe, great characters. Did they deserve Final 2 in this season? Probably not. I think they should have been the Revenge of the Island finales and leave the finales to someone else. So, a few things happen here and there. Mike or Zoe wins, whatever one you're watching. The first time I watched it was Mike. The second and third time it was Zoe. So, yeah. And then it ends with the whole island getting flooded for some reason. Okay, luckily this isn't canon, and the island is back for our reboot seasons. But okay, that was a very odd ending to a very odd season. But we have 5 more episodes to talk about, so let's get to number 5, and that is Suckers Punched. Okay, now we're getting into the actual good episodes of Total Drama All-Stars, starting with Suckers Punched. So this is where we get to see some of those really great storylines that should have been in this whole season, kind of starting. Like, for example, we got to see Gwen and Courtney start to become decently, like, non-enemies anymore, which is really cool, kind of destroying that whole dumb love triangle thing. Thank God this season did that right, at least. Destroy the whole stupid love triangle. Because Gwen at some point broke up with Duncan, fine by me, I didn't really care about their dating anyway. It was one of the most weakest ones out of them all. It felt very forced and very rushed. So yeah. And Courtney could actually find some new love with Scott of all characters, which I think is the most hilarious. It's so hilarious. I like them. Anywho, this episode is kind of like a sequel to Triple Dog Dare You from Season 1. You know, the best episode from that season. And while this episode is a better episode of All-Stars, it doesn't compare to that episode, let's be real. There was some funny moments, like, basically they have to wrestle, box people, whatever you want to say. Whatever you want to call it. Sierra has these two little, I don't even know what you want to call them. Mutated pets that she names. Nah, I don't even think she even names them. If she does, we all know what she named them. But I guess this mutated animal that Sierra has, his mom is upset with Sierra and wants to fight her. Okay, that's kind of funny. And then we have Scott trying to fight Fang, which ends up in one of the most hilarious moments of All Stars, with Scott just standing there not knowing what to do and just gets beat up. It is so hilarious. And then we have Gwen and Courtney fighting each other for some reason, to kind of stir up the drama and kind of maybe resolve some of it too, which I think is kind of nice. And then we have Duncan fight the little baby bird that he got, not the little baby bird, but the bird that he tried to get the egg from in the previous episode, which I thought was really funny, seeing him try to punch him, but not truly do that. Why do people hate this Scott so much? Or this Duncan so much? Yeah, it's not Duncan, but, you know, I'm kind of, after seeing Duncan be Duncan for 3 seasons and making it to the final, 5 at least, every season, it's nice having at least a little change. Besides, Duncan wouldn't have hurt the bunny from season 1 that he gave to DJ, so why would he hurt a little bird too? It's just that that just ended up being what he had to fight, I guess. I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny, though. And then, of course, we get to Alejandro, who ends up fighting his brother Jose. We've never seen Jose until this episode, which leads to a lot of great drama and actually some actual good character development, where Alejandro stands up to his brother, especially once he starts bashing on Heather. What a great moment in the Ala Heather moment list. This is the first episode we see Alejandro without Heather, so it's kind of cool seeing what Alejandro does without Heather. And it's not like Total Drama Island where Katie without Sadie, or Sadie without Katie ends up being extremely boring and they hardly show her at all. No, Alejandro is a really interesting character, and he does a lot even without Heather. He's still a great character, easily one of my favorites in this season, and one of my favorite characters of all time. Scott is plain old Scott. It's just overall a great episode. They end up eliminating Sierra. Okay, she already made it to the Final Four. This wasn't her season. She was fine. She came back. She was here. I don't really remember her that. I almost forget she's in this season, honestly. But she was here, and she got eliminated, so, yep. Good old Sierra. Nothing else I have to say, so let's get to number 4, which is Food Fright. I feel like I'm moving backwards when I'm talking about All-Stars. I've started with the later season, now I'm talking about the earlier... Alright, I started with the later episodes, and now I'm talking about the earlier episodes. But honestly, that's just how Total Drama All-Stars worked. I think the first half was really great, while the second half just completely destroyed this season. So, this episode is a food eating challenge mixed with an obstacle course eating challenge. Oh my god, an obstacle course challenge. Okay, I think that's kind of cool and all. Definitely a much better one than whatever the heck that season 1 episode was, where everyone's just eating and they're doing absolutely nothing. So, let's be real. The villainous Vultures carries this season for sure, with some of the best characters being on that team, and a bunch of hilarious drama between Heather wanting to be team captain and then a whole bunch of other stuff going down. It's hilarious. So they do this obstacle course. That's basically, there's not really too much story in this one. This is one of the first times we've seen Mal come out and sabotage something, but yeah. They do an obstacle course after they're done eating this giant pancake, or once they get sabotaged by the pancake. This is just such a big sabotage season. Anywho, then they go on like a salad spinner and try not to puke. Ugh, okay, so we still have that try not to puke rule, but at least this is done way, way better than Total Drama Island was with that slow-paced episode. Plus, we have a lot of funny Scott moments, Alejandro moments, Heather moments, basically anyone on the Villains Alliance. And then you have Sam, who's kind of there. My question is, Why did Sam return in Total Drama All-Stars? He's a fine enough character and all, but Sam over B, Don, or Brick? Why? He easily could have been the first one booted off, but instead they booted off a classic iconic character first. He could have easily beaten Lindsay and Joe, but nope. They had to keep around Sam just to be the punching bag, and then when he left, it was Scott. There were some funny moments in this episode. I do think it's pretty good overall, and they do get rid of Sam. Fine by me. He definitely didn't deserve to make it far at all this season. He got a lot of plot armor, honestly. Well, okay, he didn't get a lot of plot armor, but he definitely... He's just one of those characters that doesn't deserve to come back. Or doesn't need to come back. His season was fine enough. He didn't need to come back again. So, yeah. Let's move on to number 3, which is Heroes versus Villains. Man, this is actually a really, really great intro episode. In fact, this is probably one of my favorite intro episodes of all Total Drama history, honestly. Island was slow, action was slow, World Tour, the first half was good, second half was slow, Revenge, eh. So this was actually a really great, first episode, I think. It's nothing too crazy. It's basically just a lot of Chris introducing us to who's going to be in this season, and then them, of course, repeating the first challenge from the very first episode from the very first season. Jumping off a cliff and finding a key to the spa hotel. What I really like is that, unlike Season 4, where they demolished it, we actually got to see a season with them inside of the cool little spa hotel thing. I thought that was a really, really nice, really cool thing. Even if it's just for one season, I thought it was really cool. I liked it. So, we get introduced to our teams. Team Heroes versus Team Villains. There's 7 people from each season, which that's basically over half of the Revenge characters and not even a fourth of the Gen 1 characters. So, okay then. They should have maybe split it up a little more. Get rid of Sam and bring back someone from the original cast. Bring back Tyler or Owen. Someone great. Anywho, so the challenge itself is really funny. And, well, I guess there was originally going to be 13, and they had an extra seat on the plane to do that Ezekiel prank. Okay, I guess that is kind of funny. That's a fine way to do Ezekiel in a season. Not to make him host the old episode. Good lord. So then they give Team Villains the robot instead. And if you've watched World Tour, you know exactly who this robot is. Because they try to jump off a cliff, and our buddy Scott is too afraid to because his buddy Fang is waiting for him down there. So they end up accidentally pushing off the robot, and the robot ends up being the one falling in the water. And it's revealed that it's Alejandro, which is such a great scene. And this episode overall is just great too, and it shows what, a lot of good things that could have really happened with this season. Great cast overall, easily one of the best casts out of any season, having basically no bad characters, the worst one being Sam, if you don't count Mal, or Lightning, I guess. Lightning's probably my least favorite just because I didn't like it from Revenge, but he got out pretty early. So villains end up winning because Lindsay forgot how to push her little baby stroller, and the heroes end up sending home Lindsay because of that. Oh boy, we're gonna derail Lindsay for starters. Now all of a sudden she's randomly so stupid she forgets how to push a cart, and she randomly wants herself gone, so she draws an X on her face. Okay, this is the first lazy writing we see from this season. Why does this happen? I don't know. But Lindsay ends up getting the boot. Why Lindsay? She's the greatest Total Drama character. She needs a redemption season, and we just have to keep that stupid running gag where Lindsay has to get eliminated for something stupid. At least out of all the other, at least this is the best episode where it has Lindsay being eliminated in it, because I feel like it's just structured. A lot of the other... But you see, with the older seasons, they actually tried to change the story to match the characters. Like, if a character is going to get eliminated, they changed the story so that it would... So you're like, oh, okay, now I see why they're getting eliminated. Instead of changing the character to make them eliminated, making Lindsay randomly super stupid And then, oh, look at that, now she's the one booted out. Why? Why did Lindsay have to get eliminated? She's such a great character. Oh, well. Besides the horrible elimination, I think this was a really great start to what could have been a really great season. We have 2 episodes left, so let's get to number 2, which is Evil Dread. Another really great episode, which definitely carries this pretty meh season overall. So they have to dig in the sand and find different sculptures, almost kind of like the World Tour Paris one. Honestly, this might be better than that episode from Total Drama World Tour, because that episode was just a lot of Sierra bawling her eyes out and Lindsay getting her stupid elimination that episode. This, at least, we got to see some funny Gen 1 versus Gen 2 moments, some hilarious villain moments, and an actual elimination that at least makes sense, and I didn't mind as much. So Alejandro pretends that his legs are asleep and he can't feel them, so every episode now he ends up walking on his hands, which is, it's just so hilariously funny. And I think the reason why this episode is better than the first episode is just for the comedy itself. I tell you, the villains this season carry the comedy 100%. The heroes, not so much. My favorite character from the heroes was Lindsay, and she got eliminated. So, I mean, there's not much point. Besides Courtney now, the rest of the heroes team is just fine. But the villains team is what has the best team. So we have Heather and Joe fighting over who's going to be team captain, and all of them pushing each other into the pit of crabs. It's just so hilarious. And Scott accidentally hitting Mike on the head with a shovel, revealing our main villain for the season. Thanks for that, Scott. And this is the episode that we see that Sam is going to be our punching bag for this season. Okay. Overall, this is a really great episode. It's really funny. It has some great moments. Also, like seeing Sierra and Cameron work together. Since Sierra doesn't have Cody anymore, who's she going to work with, right? Well, none other than Cameron. It's overall a great episode, and it's easily one of my favorites to this season, but not my favorite. So let's get into my favorite episode from Total Drama All-Stars, and that is Moon Madness. Of course this was going to be number 1. This is a really well-constructed episode, and it's actually kind of interesting. Yeah, the cartoony's kind of humor, but it's been very cartoony for the last many seasons and many episodes, so who cares anymore? And this cartoony humor doesn't bother me as much as, say, push a button and it resets Mal thing. It's like, well then what's the point of even making this horrible villain if you're not going to know what to do with him? Anywho, so this episode we have this wild, I don't even know what you want to call it. The moon turns a different color and now the animals have swapped. The characters, or the animals who are normally sweet and innocent are now trying to eat everyone, and the animals are usually mean and vicious are the opposite, which I think is such a great episode and leads to some really interesting ideas. And and of course it changes Mike to Mal because we needed more of him. And of course Heather pretends that she's now this really nice character, which ends up being some of the most hilarious scenes I've seen from Total Drama All-Stars, and tricks everyone on the villains team, including Alejandro, into thinking she's now really sweet. It's just, oh, it's so hilarious. This is how you do good writing in what is overall a pretty terrible season. But man, this episode is hilarious. I love the challenge of them trying to, well, they're basically just running from point A to point B, but they make it a lot of fun, and there's a lot of funny moments in this episode too. Plus, this is the start where we got to see some Gwen trying to help Courtney out moments, so it isn't just Gwen trying to help Courtney, but it fails miserably. And this is one of the first episodes we see Courtney and Duncan on their different teams now. And luckily Sam's not there to steal the punching bag anymore, and now it's just Scott, which I think is really funny, because he's a hilarious character, and it's just fun. He's fun. This is how you do a good punching bag character. Looking at you, SpongeBob. So yeah, that's easily the best parts about this episode. The worst parts are Mal, but it doesn't bother me this much, because Mal's only in it for about half the episode, and then he's back to Mike. And they try not to focus too much on the heroes this episode, and try to focus on the villains. I swear, the villainous vultures are what carries this season. I feel like I've been saying that many times, but it's true. So, the villains end up winning, and the hero, or I guess Cameron, ends up nominating himself to go, but instead he just nominates himself to the other team. Okay. But, man, there's a lot of funny moments in this episode. It's nice having at least one episode that's just a non-elimination, because we have a great cast, and I don't want to see Heather go yet. I know she's the next one after Sam. I don't want to see her go yet. She needs some more episodes. Anywho, I can easily say that Mood Madness is my favorite episode from Total Drama All-Stars, and probably always will be. Man, oh man, what a train wreck this was. Now, a lot of people do consider this a pretty bad season, and even put it sometimes as their worst season ever, which I personally disagree. I don't think it's as bad as Pocket 2, but... And I honestly would say that this season is actually better than Revenge of the Island. Yeah, it's better than Revenge of the Island. The story may be a little all over the place, and the season may feel rushed, but at least we had an amazing cast this time around, with some of the best of the best. Sure, some of them got derailed. The elimination order was horrible, but at least we got to see a great cast with some actually really good episodes here and there. It is home to the worst episode of all time, but when it does have a lot of low lows, but it also does have a lot of high highs as well. Especially after seeing Revenge of the Island, I was just kind of meh on it. And I'm glad we're done with the stupid mutated zombie stuff from... Not zombies, mutated junk from Revenge. And now everything's all clean and stuff. And there were some funny moments. We have some great characters who didn't derail. Cough, cough, a la Heather. And a few others here and there, of course. And there is some decent things about this season that makes it stand out. And I do think it's the best out of the horrid era of... Or the best out of the horrible era of Total Drama. It's still not a great season, and it's definitely the weakest that has the Gen 1 characters in it. But I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. And in fact, I think it's even better than Revenge, one that people say is a better season than that one. So, with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time. Have a good day.